For most people, the story of Youngstown's bombings is cleanly packaged. A brutal mob war, Italian factions, power struggles, retribution. Between the early 1960s and late 1970s, more than 60 bombings shook the Mahoning Valley. Homes, cars, businesses, sometimes people, sometimes warnings, sometimes funerals followed by more explosions. That's the version everyone knows. But buried beneath that narrative is another pattern. One that doesn't line up with the war, one that doesn't match the players, and one that never really stopped. In the official timeline, the mob war has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Bombings escalate when factions clash, peak during leadership disputes, then taper off as power consolidates. Except, that isn't what happened. Some explosions occurred when no known conflict existed. Others targeted people with no confirmed ties to either faction. A few hit properties that had already changed hands or belonged to individuals considered neutral, even protected. And strangest of all, several bombs detonated after key mob figures were already dead or incarcerated. Police reports quietly note this inconsistency. So do federal memos. But none linger on it. One example stands out. A storefront on the south side bombed twice in the same year. The owner wasn't connected. No gambling, no loan sharking. No known disputes. The first bombing was written off as a mistake. The second came after the owner had already sold the business and moved away. No one could explain who the message was meant for. Then there were the timing anomalies. Some bombings occurred within hours of private meetings that were never officially acknowledged. Others detonated days before indictments that hadn't yet been announced. In a few cases, the targets changed their behavior immediately after the blast, selling property, dropping lawsuits, backing out of contracts, almost like they understood the warning, even if the police didn't. And then there were the bombs that didn't make sense at all. Empty lots, abandoned cars, buildings scheduled for demolition anyway. No follow-up violence, no retaliation, no arrests. Just explosions that announced themselves and disappeared into the night. Retired detectives admit off the record that they stopped trying to connect every bomb to the mob war. The pattern was too messy. Too layered, too quiet in places where violence should have escalated but didn't. By the late 1970s, the bombings slowed. The war was declared over. The city moved on, but not all the bombs stopped. Smaller ones followed, quieter ones. Never claimed, rarely investigated with urgency. Fires ruled accidental, blasts blamed on gas lines, files closed quickly. That's where the theories begin. One theory says the bombings weren't just about power, but about compliance. That organized crime factions weren't always the authors, but sometimes the delivery system. That certain explosions served interests beyond street-level control. Labor disputes, development projects, quiet land transfers, pressure applied without signatures. Another theory suggests something darker, that a separate crew operated parallel to the mob war, not aligned to any family, not interested in territory, just enforcement, specialists who made problems go away and made examples without leaving fingerprints. Their bombs didn't announce dominance, they enforced silence. There's also the federal theory, that some bombings were allowed to happen, others quietly ignored, a way to let factions weaken themselves, a pressure valve. Let the violence burn hot until everyone was easier to manage. And then there's the theory no one likes to say out loud, that some of the bombings weren't criminal at all. Former residents talk about explosions that never made the news. Blasts heard, felt, but never reported. Windows rattling in the middle of the night followed by nothing. No sirens, no investigation, no headlines. They say certain addresses were protected, others were marked, and a few were hit repeatedly until the people inside left town altogether. The last unexplained bombing on record occurred years after the mob war supposedly ended. The target had no criminal ties, no public enemies, just a business standing in the way of a development project that went forward months later. The case file ends with a single sentence, no known motive. Today, Youngstown still bears the scars. Rebuilt blocks, empty lots, stories told carefully, if at all. Ask the wrong questions and people change the subject. Ask the right ones and they go quiet. Because if the mob war was the music everyone heard, The unexplained bombings were the baseline underneath. Low, steady, and never really gone.